The final total was
7,381.
And that is unreal.
$14 million in gold sat on the table, and the room looked like a scene from another world. 8,000 ounces of gold, more than 500 pounds of pure yellow metal, lay there in neat, heavy piles. The last weekly cleanout alone reached 724 ounces, a single haul worth nearly $1.4 million. It was not just a good week. It was the kind of weigh-in that miners talk about for years, the kind that turns into legend. On any normal mining show, a cleanout like that would be the headline for the entire season. Here, it was simply the final exclamation mark on a run that pushed one operation far beyond what most crews could even imagine. Few outfits on Earth would ever see numbers like these, let alone stack them on top of an already massive season total. It felt like all competition had been left in the dust, blown away by the sheer scale of what had just been pulled from the ground. The crew celebrated like champions. Laughs, high fives, relief, and pride filled the air. Every long shift and every cold morning suddenly felt worth it. The gold table had turned into a trophy stand, and this final weigh-in made it clear that this season stood in a league of its own. But while the cameras focused on shining metal and smiling faces, a different reality quietly sat just out of frame. The claim that had produced this record-breaking run was nearly out of easy gold. The shallow pay dirt that made this possible had been chewed up, washed, and weighed. The future was not sitting in the pans on the table. It was sitting somewhere out there in the unknown. To stay on top, to keep running at a level that crushed any rival, a new move would be needed. And that next move would be the most dangerous one yet, spending $15 million on a legendary claim called Dominion Creek, a place that promised $160 million in gold, but started out by almost destroying everything. Scribner Creek had been good for a long time, but this season turned it into something else entirely. From early thaw to the final cleanup, the site operated like a massive machine running on pure determination. Big Red and Slucifer, the two main wash plants, became the pounding heart of the claim. Those plants did not get breaks. They got fuel, maintenance, and more pay dirt. 16-hour days were standard. If a belt slipped at midnight, it was fixed at midnight. If a pump failed in the middle of a storm, it was repaired in the mud and rain because gold never waits. Huge excavators cut deep into the ground, peeling away layers of rock and gravel. Dozers shaped long, flat benches and pushed mountains of material into position. Haul trucks ran back and forth until the trails looked like scars carved into the earth. Every load that hit the hopper was another small chance at gold, and over the season, those chances added up to something enormous. The amount of ground moved at Scribner that season was almost impossible to picture. Enough earth was stripped and processed to bury a football field under tons of gravel. Each scoop of pay dirt held only a tiny fraction of 1 ounce. But when millions of scoops passed through the sluice, the final total exploded. For fans watching, the story was simple. This was dominance. Week after week, the numbers climbed, and the total ounces left most other crews staring at the board in disbelief. It looked like a clear sign that this operation had found the perfect claim, the perfect system, and the perfect formula for success. But Scribner held a secret, and that secret was running out. The shallow, easy-to-reach pay was nearly gone. It had been dug out over multiple seasons, processed, and turned into the gold now sitting in jars and on scales. What remained below the surface was still gold-bearing ground, but it was buried much deeper, locked underneath thick layers of useless overburden. To reach it, more fuel would be burned, more time would be spent, more strain would be placed on every machine. Each extra foot of material that held no gold meant more money thrown into the process before a single ounce could be recovered. Profit would be squeezed tighter with every bucket. At the same time, the operation no longer existed in a quiet corner of the world. It had a reputation. It had an audience. Millions of viewers expected to see big gold totals and bold moves. The crew had built lives around that income. Bills, families, futures, all of it depended on continued success. Staying at Scribner meant slow decline, shrinking margins, and constant struggle just to stay even. If the operation wanted to keep destroying expectations and leaving rivals behind, Scribner Creek would not be enough. A new claim had to be found. As Scribner's limits appeared more clearly, attention turned toward one name that had been floating around mining circles for years:
Dominion Creek. Among miners who know the Klondike, that name carried a quiet power. Stories described it as one of the last great opportunities in the region, a place where serious placer deposits still waited beneath the surface. For a long time, those stories remained at the edge of the conversation. There was always another cut to open at Scribner, another season to finish, another target to meet. But once the easy gold at Scribner had been stripped away, Dominion moved from background rumor to the center of the plan. Reports pointed to thick layers of pay spread out over large sections of the valley. Geological work suggested that the claim could hold gold worth around $160 million. That kind of number did more than raise eyebrows. It hinted at a future where multiple plants could run for multiple seasons, turning Dominion into the backbone of an entire mining empire. For an operation that had just hit its best season ever and wanted to stay ahead of anyone else in the game, Dominion looked like the perfect next step. The problem, however, was not small. Dominion came with a $15 million price tag. That figure nearly matched the total value of the record Scribner season. The entire fortune that had just been pulled from the ground would need to be put on the line, and claims like Dominion came with no guarantees. Geological reports can guide, but they cannot promise. Test holes can give hints, but they cannot reveal every secret. The ground still decides everything. If the reports turned out to be wrong, or even just slightly off, the results could be devastating. $15 million gone, equipment tied up on bad ground, a crew hanging in the balance with nowhere else to go. On the other hand, if the reports were right and the gold really sat there and the volume suggested, the payoff could be unmatched. Dominion could become the claim that made past seasons look small. That tension created a situation few miners ever face. This was not just about chasing a good year. This was about choosing between a slow fade at Scribner and a massive all-in gamble on Dominion Creek. The decision would not only set the course of the next season, it would define the future of the entire operation.
Eventually, thinking and talking reached their limits. A choice had to be made. Scribner Creek still held some gold, but every ounce would be harder and more expensive to reach. Dominion Creek sat waiting as a wide, unknown valley filled with hints of a fortune. On one side was the comfort of familiar cuts and a known operation slowly losing its edge. On the other was a $15 million risk that could either secure the next decade or cut the story short in one brutal move. The deal for Dominion went through. $15 million left the account, and the claim changed hands. In one instant, years of profit from long seasons, cold mornings, and record weigh-ins turned into ownership of a giant, undeveloped stretch of ground. Scribner became the past. Dominion became the future. The shift felt real and heavy as machines were loaded for the move. Excavators that had torn into Scribner's pay now sat chained down on low beds. Dozers, trucks, fuel tanks, and support gear formed a long convoy stretching across the road. Big Red and Slucifer followed, stripped down and prepared for a new life on new ground. The convoy itself looked like a moving city of steel. As it rolled away from Scribner Creek, the familiar cuts and benches faded into the distance. A place that had delivered 8,000 ounces and a $14 million season was left behind, and the operation drove straight toward the unknown. When the first machines finally rolled into Dominion Creek, the sight was overwhelming. The claim was huge. Ridges ran along the horizon, flats spread out along the valley floor, and raw ground stretched in all directions. It was easy to imagine millions of dollars in gold hidden somewhere beneath all that earth. But there was one problem. Dominion was not a functioning mine. It was a blank slate. There were no solid roads built for constant traffic, no stable pads set up for plants, no fuel systems ready to feed dozens of hungry machines, no shops prepared to handle major breakdowns. Every piece of infrastructure that Scribner had developed over years of work simply did not exist here yet. To unlock the gold that might be hiding underground, the crew would first have to build an entire operation from scratch. That meant more time, more diesel, more steel, and more money before a single ounce of gold could be weighed. The $15 million bet was only the beginning.
From the first attempts to move heavy equipment at Dominion, the claims showed its cruel side. What looked like firm ground on the surface often turned into a nightmare underneath. Fully loaded haul trucks rolled out and suddenly sank deep into hidden pockets of mud. Dozers tried to push forward and found themselves stuck and spinning instead. Excavators perched on the edge of new cuts watched the ground crumble beneath them. Each rescue became a slow, grinding mission. A stuck truck required one, maybe two machines, heavy chains, careful pushes and pulls. The more it struggled, the deeper it sank. Every Every minute burned fuel and took up daylight that could never be recovered. Before the plants could even be assembled, roads had to be carved out across the swampy terrain. Rock and gravel were hauled in to build up a surface strong enough to hold constant traffic. Pads needed to be raised and compacted to keep Big Red and Sluicifer from sinking into the muck. The crew found itself doing the hard work of road builders instead of gold miners, fighting the claim just to reach the point where mining could even begin. Meanwhile, the season clock continued to tick. Fuel bills climbed at a frightening pace. Maintenance demands grew as machines slogged through mud day after day. On top of that, wages and operating costs continued no matter how much gold came out of the ground. The pressure led to a tough decision. If the claim could not be changed, the production targets would have to be. The plan was to run about 20% more material through the plants than originally intended. The idea was simple: more pay dirt in, more chances for gold out. It was the only way to justify the massive costs of getting set up at Dominion. When the plants finally fired up, there was a brief flicker of hope. Engines roared, water flowed, and both Big Red and Sluicifer began to chew through ground again. Trucks cycled as fast as they could. Excavators fed pay dirt into the system. For a short time, it felt like the operation might finally be turning the corner. Then reality hit. Pushing the plants and machines that hard in those conditions came at a price. Belts that had survived the grind at Scribner snapped under the stress. Heavy, wet material jammed feeders. The main water pump failed completely, shutting down everything tied to it. Each breakdown brought the mine to a standstill and forced the crew into another round of emergency repairs. Every hour with silent wash plants meant lost gold and rising expenses. Then the weather decided to join in. At Dominion's higher elevation, storms rolled in with little warning. Heavy rain pounded the claim, soaking already weak ground and turning it into a deep, sticky mess. Spots that had just barely held up now swallowed trucks whole. Water seeped into machinery, affected electronics, and made every job slower and more dangerous. Some days nothing moved at all. The crew could only sit and watch the rain fall, knowing that each lost day dragged the operation closer to serious trouble. Finally, after all the mud, all the road building, all the fuel, and all the stress, enough pay dirt had passed through the plants to do full cleanouts. The results were a shock. The first major cleanouts from Dominion produced almost no gold. A few flakes appeared, but nothing close to what was needed. For a claim that had cost $15 million, the early numbers were beyond disappointing. They were frightening. The red numbers on the cost sheets began to rise. The dream of a claim that would keep the operation ahead of every rival now looked like it might become the decision that ended everything.
The camp atmosphere changed as the bad results piled up. The energy that had once driven long days at Scribner began to fade. Conversations grew shorter and heavier. Jokes disappeared. Tensions settled into every corner of the site. Everyone could see the problem. The cost of building Dominion into a running operation had already been enormous. Roads, pads, fuel, maintenance, wages, equipment transport, and constant repairs chewed through money day after day. In return, the claim produced almost nothing. Cleanouts that should have lifted spirits instead delivered small, embarrassing totals. The ground that was supposed to hold one of the richest pay streaks in the region was starting to look like a money pit. Still, quitting was not an option. Too much had already been invested. The only way out was forward. New test cuts were opened. Different areas of Dominion were explored and sampled. The crew dug into fresh sections of the valley, following every hint from the geological reports. Dominion was too big to give up after a handful of disappointing runs. Somewhere out there, the ground had to match the promise that led to that $15 million leap. Then, in one new area, the dirt began to tell a different story. The color of the material changed. The mix of gravel, sand, and fines looked different from the weak pay that had been tried before. While nothing can ever be certain until the gold shows up in the mats, small shifts like this often signal a new pay channel or a better layer of ground. Loads from this new cut went into Sluicifer. The plant did what it always does. Engines roared, screens shook, and water rushed over riffles. On the surface, it looked no different from the many runs that had come before. The relancer waited in the sluice box. When the crew finally shut down and started cleaning out the mats, the change became obvious. Strong lines of gold sat deep in the riffles. Bright yellow filled sections that had been nearly empty in earlier cleanouts. For the first time since arriving at Dominion, the ground produced results that matched the stories. That discovery lit a fire under the operation. Focus locked onto that cut. Pay dirt from the new area became the main feed for the plant. Shifts stretched as long as possible. Repairs stayed constant, but now they had a real purpose. Sluicifer began to produce weekly totals that finally felt worth the effort. Around 145 ounces per week from this new zone. The claim that had looked like a financial trap now showed its first real sign of becoming the payoff everyone hoped for.
All of the roads, all of the stuck trucks, all of the breakdowns, and all of the nearly empty early cleanouts led to one crucial moment. Pay dirt from the better cut had been running steadily for weeks. Big Red and Sluicifer had worked hard as they could under the circumstances. Now it was time to see what that effort added up to. Gold from both plants was gathered together for a major cleanout. Concentrates were processed, dried, and carefully poured. The number on the scale began to climb. 100 ounces, then more. 200, 300, it kept going. 400, 500. The air in the room tightened as the total continued to rise. When the last of the gold settled and the final number appeared, the total landed at 724 ounces. Over 45 pounds of gold sat there, worth nearly $1.4 million. For a season that had teetered on the edge of disaster, that final weigh-in felt like a shockwave. The same operation that had seemed moments away from being crushed by a bad claim had just produced a cleanout that instantly stood out as one of the most powerful in the entire season. The numbers from that weigh-in did more than look good on camera. They proved that Dominion's good ground was real. The rich layer feeding Slucifer and Big Red had the strength needed to support a serious mining operation. It turned a story of near bankruptcy and failure into one of survival and comeback. Compared with most other crews and most other seasons in the region, this final cleanout pushed the operation back into a category of its own. Not many mining outfits on Earth can stack a 700+ ounce week on top of an 8,000 ounce season. That kind of output sits in a different class, a level of production that leaves others struggling to keep up. It does not erase the risk that led there. It does not erase the fear, the red ink, or the endless days and nights of fighting mud and broken iron. But it does prove one thing clearly. When Dominion finally cooperated, the result was a final weigh-in that crushed expectations and cemented the season as one that stood above the rest.
The story of this season shows how thin the line can be between total dominance and complete collapse. Scribner Creek delivered a record run, 8,000 ounces, $14 to $15 million, and a final weekly weigh-in that would leave most competitors stunned. That performance alone could have gone down as one of the strongest in recent memory, but it also hid a countdown. Scribner's shallow pay was finished. The same ground that made the operation look unbeatable was quietly running out. Dominion Creek offered a way forward, but at a price that almost no miner would dare to pay. $15 million for a single claim. The move turned past success into a bet on the future. Then the future arrived in the form of swampy ground, stuck machines, endless road building, brutal weather, and cleanouts so weak they threatened to push the entire operation over a cliff. For a long stretch, it looked like Dominion would become a warning story, a lesson in how even the biggest player can overreach and lose everything. Only when that one promising cut appeared did the tide turn. Weekly totals near 145 ounces, followed by the massive 724-ounce cleanout, dragged the season back from the edge. That final weigh-in did more than shine on camera. It restored belief in the claim and pushed the operation back into a position of strength. Still, the gamble is not truly finished. Dominion must continue to prove itself across future cuts and future seasons. Weather will continue to hit, machines will continue to break. The same ground that nearly buried the operation in mud could still cause trouble at any time. Yet, for this season, the end result is clear. A record run at Scribner Creek and a giant comeback at Dominion combine into a story where one operation pushed ahead with numbers that most miners will never see. The final weigh-in did exactly what the title suggests. It instantly separated this season from the rest and showed just how far ahead a determined crew can go when everything is on the line. Anyone who enjoys these high-stakes mining stories, from record cleanouts to risky claim moves and near disasters in the mud, can stay connected to more stories like this through Gold Era 2.0, where future videos will keep following the gold, the gambles, and the moments that turn ordinary seasons into legends.